A marksman never owned the ground she could hit. She owned only the seconds her shot bought. Bryony Cade needed those seconds to move a reduced team into Ravelyn Yard before Cass Rayner's force made the last usable heavy transfer line worthless. Her first precision decision opened the apron. Then one competent enemy position went quiet earlier than the pressure should have explained. Bryony kept moving. The silence stayed with her. Fire cracked across the outer apron and came back from steel and concrete until direction became a bad guess. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than Bryony. Ignored the noise that sounded closest and watched what the shooting actually stopped. One hostile position kept pinning the two people nearest the open ground. She waited through a burst, saw the change she needed, and fired once. The pressure broke long enough. Move. 2 of her people crossed. Another followed. Nobody stood in the open to admire the result. They gained several yards because one gun had stopped owning those seconds. Bryony kept her cheek off the stock for one extra breath and listened to the return fire. Nothing came from the position she had hit. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than that was expected. What bothered her was the other silence, farther out, where no one had been forced off anything she could see. The yard gave her no clean reason for it, only absence. She refused to promote absence into knowledge. Her right hand tingled when she settled it back against the rifle, a cottony numbness across 2 fingers. She flexed them once. Feeling returned enough to trust. Ahead, a position on the far side of the apron that had been firing steadily simply stopped. Too soon for what they had done to explain all of it. She filed that away and kept the team moving. Milo caught her sleeve before she sent the next pair toward a sloped loading ramp on their right. Not that. Bryony looked where he pointed. The ramp still appeared intact from her angle, but its lower edge had pulled away from the supporting slab. Dust sifted through the gap whenever something struck nearby. It'll take weight until it doesn't, Milo said. You sure? No. That's the problem. She changed the movement order. The alternative cost time and left them exposed longer along cold concrete barriers. But it was ground they could use without betting the team on a damaged slab. Is less than #0. 5# is greater. Then Cass's people made them pay for the choice. Fire returned from deeper in the yard, disciplined and short, forcing Bryony to decide when to hold and when to spend another few seconds. She used precision twice more to open movement, not to chase a body count. A head dropped. A burst ended. Somebody moved. The numbness returned when she changed her grip. Hand, Milo asked without looking at her. Works. That wasn't the question. It's the answer you're getting. Behind them, the damaged ramp shuddered under another impact and shed a sheet of grit. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. Milo glanced back once, then studied the next surface. Being right did not make the next answer easier. They reached hard cover along the inner edge of the outer apron, with everyone who had started the crossing moving under their own power. Bryony let herself count that as a win. Farther inside Ravelyn Yard, a heavy metallic concussion rolled through the structures. Another followed after a gap. The denial work was still advancing. She did not need an exact countdown. Every delay spent part of the only window they had. She checked the far position again. Still quiet. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. The rest of Cass's line remained coherent. Could be conservation. A command break. Men shifting after losing the advantage on the apron. Ordinary possibilities. None worth stopping the assault to solve. Warehouse Row, she said. Milo looked once toward the silent sector, then toward the repeating dark mouths between the industrial buildings. You trust the quiet. I trust that it isn't shooting at us right now. That's a smaller claim. Keep it that way. They moved. Their boots scraped grit, then entered harder echoes between the warehouses. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than sound. narrowed and multiplied at once. The apron behind them had been open and ugly, but simple. Warehouse row was neither. The first shots came from high in front, close enough in sound to pull every eye the same way. Bryony felt her attention lock there automatically. Highest visible threat. Solve it first. Then Milo pointed low and left, not at a shooter but at the ground between them and the next cover. A damaged freight frame had sagged across the lane, leaving a passage that looked usable until light caught the twisted load above it. That won't stay what it is, he said. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. Another burst struck metal overhead and drove the team tighter behind cover. 2 problems. One could kill them where they crouched. The other could trap movement if they chose wrong. Her old answer would have been simple: remove the gun, then move. The angles in Warehouse Row did not promise to stay simple that long. Bryony glanced back once. The competent position that had gone quiet remained quiet. No fresh fire followed them from it. Then a new burst sounded deeper among the warehouses, from somewhere she had not expected the next pressure to be. Milo watched the damaged lane. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. Bryony watched the gunfire. They had made it into Ravelyn Yard. The yard was already asking for 2 decisions at the same time. The new fire hammered the warehouse skin above Bryony and threw bright scraps down the lane. She had one problem she understood. A disciplined position high and forward was keeping the team folded against cover. The second problem sat lower and looked quieter. The damaged lane Milo had rejected was no better from this side, and the open space beyond it offered no dependable movement without someone judging what still held. Bryony could work the gunfire or study the ground. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. Doing both meant doing one late. You own movement, she told Milo. I own the pressure. He leaned just far enough to read the structures ahead. Until the structures change their mind. Then change yours faster. That I can do. Her instinct wanted the most visible, lethal problem until it was gone. That instinct had kept people alive before. It could also consume every spare second. Milo pointed toward a recessed loading edge farther along the row. That section's usable. For now, is less than #0. 4# is greater than. Bryony took the qualifier seriously and shifted the team toward it, while she kept the high position too busy to settle. Her right fingers dulled again. She changed her grip, automatic, and carried on. The first pair reached Milo's chosen section. The second had barely started when something heavy struck deeper in the row. The vibration came through the steel before the sound finished. Dust shook loose. A bent overhead assembly that had seemed stable tilted another few inches. Back, Milo said. Louder. Back now is less than #0. 3# is greater than. The moving pair reversed into cover as debris rattled down where they had been headed. His option had been reasonable when he offered it. Now it was not. You just sold me that ground, Bryony said. I'm buying it back cheap. With interest. Always. The exchange lasted a breath. Fire from the high position resumed and turned the joke, if it had been one, into a decision. What stays? Milo scanned the lane and pointed toward a wider stretch they had avoided because it offered less protection. That, more exposed, less likely to come down on us. Bryony understood the trade. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. She managed the visible threat while Milo controlled movement against the damaged ground. Neither task could wait for the other to be finished first. The exposed stretch had one advantage. It told the truth. No hanging load, no cracked lip pretending to be solid, nowhere to disappear from the consequences. Bryony preferred honest danger when she could get it. She watched the high position, let one burst spend itself, and gave Milo a 2-finger signal. He sent the next body across without waiting for a second confirmation. Is less than #0. For 4# is greater than. That was how they had worked before the yard began making every decision expire. She owned the lethal timing. He owned whether the surface beneath it could still be trusted. The team crossed. They paused when fire settled and moved when Bryony broke its rhythm. They gained less distance than she wanted and spent more time than she could afford, but they did not gamble on a structure that had already changed once. Halfway through, the firing from the high position thinned. Then it stopped. Bryony noticed before she trusted it. Dust hung in the broken light. He is less than #0. 4# is greater than. Somewhere ahead, boots scraped once, then vanished into the echoes. The quiet sector from the apron returned again. Same abrupt absence. Maybe the same ordinary reasons. Ammunition, a command break, somebody giving up a bad angle. "Keep going," she said. Milo looked at her. "You calling it clear?" "I'm calling it quiet." "Better." The next pair crossed the wider stretch. The silence held long enough for them to reach partial cover. Then fire returned from lower down the row and farther across than Bryony expected, forcing the last people flat behind dented industrial bins. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. She shifted her attention and answered only enough to keep them from being fixed in place. The important change was not that the enemy had started shooting again. It was where the shots came from. She looked toward the high position that had gone quiet. Nothing obvious remained there, except disturbed dust and an angle that suddenly seemed empty. Milo followed her gaze. "Different place," he said. "Looks like it." "Same people." "Don't know." That was the boundary. Bryony stayed on the useful side of it. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. They had partial access to Warehouse Row, but the team was stretched across worse cover than she had wanted. The easy-looking movement option was gone, and the denial work deeper in Ravelyn Yard had continued while they solved any of it. A dull, metallic concussion rolled through the buildings. Bryony felt it in the concrete before the echo reached her. She flexed her right fingers once behind cover. The numbness was still a warning, not a failure, but she had started checking it too often. She stopped. Ahead, the changed hostile position made the next open advance a poor bet. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. The maintenance bay sat farther in a hard industrial volume they could not ignore. If they left it uncontrolled, Warehouse Row would keep feeding them into somebody else's timing. "We take the bay," Bryony said. Milo studied the battered ground between them, and it slower this time. "That a request for certainty?" "No." "Good. I'm fresh out." Another burst cracked from the new position and came back from 3 walls. The fight had moved without asking her permission. Bryony rose just enough to see what had changed. She rose just enough to see past the broken edge of cover, and the answer was worse than a clear shot. The pressure that had shifted in Warehouse Row now cut across the only approach that still mattered. Beyond it, the maintenance bay sat open in pieces, damaged doors, concrete floor, steel frames throwing sound back twice. If they did not own that space, they would keep crossing exposed ground under fire that changed faster than they could read it. Bay first. Milo looked once, then nodded toward a strip of ground that was ugly but still usable. "It'll take us..." "For how long?" He gave her a flat look. "Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. You keep asking the romantic questions." Another metallic concussion rolled again from deeper in Ravelyn Yard. The transfer line was still being worked against. Every second spent here belonged to Cass 2. Bryony led the push only as far as she had to. Her rifle mattered while distance existed. Then the distance collapsed into steel columns, broken equipment, and men close enough to hear one another breathe. Her right fingers went numb again when she tightened her grip. She loosened once, reset, and kept moving. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. The first resistance inside the bay was disciplined enough to stop them without wasting motion. Fire snapped across the interior, short and controlled, forcing Bryony's element flat behind machinery that gave them cover but no useful way forward. She could not solve that from the edge. "Left side's dying," Milo said. Bryony saw the sag in the frame he meant and redirected before anyone committed weight to it. The correction opened a different problem. One of Cass's people moved from cover at the same time she did, both of them trying to use the same narrow space before the other could close it. The gap vanished. Bryony pulled the rifle tight to her body before it could become an obstacle. The other fighter hit her hard enough to drive her shoulder into a steel upright. Breath left her. She recovered on balance and leverage, turning the collision away from the teammate behind her. The other fighter was fast and fully committed. Bryony had no room for a clean angle and no interest in creating a demonstration out of it. She used the space that existed. The impact drove her dominant hand into steel. White pain flashed from palm to forearm. Her fingers opened before she told them to. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than that. Changed everything immediately. The rifle shifted loose. Bryony stopped asking the injured hand for fine control and used her body instead. She drove the contact sideways, forcing the defender off the line he had been trying to hold. One of her operators entered the opening, then another. The defender went down under combined pressure. Steel popped somewhere overhead as heat and impact worked through the structure. The smell was dust, hot metal, old oil. Bryony tasted grit when she breathed through her mouth. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. None of it helped tell her where the next shot would come from, so she stopped trying to make atmosphere useful. Bryony reached for her weapon and felt the difference at once. Her hand still closed, but badly. Grip came back broad and delayed, as though the message from her fingers had to travel through wet cloth. She could hold. She could move. Delicate adjustments no longer arrived on demand. Another burst hit close. One of her operators folded behind a steel base with a sharp cry and stayed down. Hit. Still here. Can you move? A breath. With help is less than #0. 3# is greater than. That answer cost the team one full fighting body and part of another. Keep them covered, Bryony said. Milo was already shifting people around the bad ground. He did not ask whether her hand was all right. He had seen it fail. You good enough? He asked instead. For this minute. I hate answers with expiration dates. Then stop giving them to me. He almost smiled. Almost. They pushed through the remaining resistance by inches, noise, and people doing the work in front of them instead of the work they wished they had. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. The maintenance bay became theirs only after the surviving defenders could no longer hold it without being overrun. The gain was real. So was the cost. Bryony checked the wounded operator, then stopped herself from taking over work. Someone else could do better. The person was alive, but future movement would be slower. The team had one fewer fully capable body. Her own hand settled into a dull numbness that no longer cleared with a flex. Fine movements lagged. Broader ones still came. She adjusted the way she held the rifle and kept the limitation private except where it changed a decision. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than Milo. Looked toward the bay's far opening. We can use this. Before Bryony answered, fire cracked outside on a line she had not expected. Not from the position they had just beaten. Not from the angle that had been pressuring Warehouse Row. The team dropped behind fresh cover as rounds struck metal beyond the opening. Bryony listened to the new pattern. The bay was secure. The ground beyond it had already changed. Another heavy concussion traveled through the structure from deeper in the yard. They had won something necessary and come out weaker. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. She looked once at her hand, then toward the new pressure outside. The quiet pieces of the fight still refused to mean one simple thing. The maintenance bay should have bought breathing room. For a minute, it almost did. The sector behind and to one side of the bay went quiet, not merely quieter. No fresh impacts. No movement, Bryony could confirm. No renewed pressure from the position they had already forced out of the interior. They had taken ground twice, and the reduced fire fit the simplest reading. Cass's people had less local control than before. Bryony did not love the conclusion. Is less than #0. 4 hashes greater than she did not need to love it. Another heavy concussion came from deeper in Ravelyn Yard. The transfer line would not wait. Her team had a wounded operator, fewer hands, and no spare minutes to hold every angle. She flexed her dominant hand. The fingers answered late. "Shift 2 forward," she said. "Keep the wounded moving when we move." Milo studied the quiet sector.
"You see something?" "No. That doesn't sound reassuring." "It isn't supposed to." There was no obvious warning to argue over. Bryony reallocated what she had because standing still would spend the same people and the same time without buying distance. The change gave them momentum. One pair moved farther toward the next usable cover while another protected the wounded operator's route out of the bay. The quiet held. Bryony watched for the signs that would tell her she had judged wrong. Movement at an edge, a return burst, somebody using the thinner coverage. Nothing came. The absence looked like control earned by pressure. She never called it safe. Safe was not a word the yard had offered. Controlled enough was different. Controlled enough was a decision. Milo moved with a hitch now. When he changed direction, one arm stayed closer to his ribs. He still worked, still checked the damaged surfaces before anyone committed weight to them. "Forward edge is usable," he said. "For how long?" "Longer if you stop asking." Bryony nodded toward the louder threat. "Then make it count." She put scarce attention where the visible danger was greatest. A short burst struck from a place that had not been part of her last working picture. Confusion came first. Sound came hard off the walls, and for half a second the new fire seemed to belong to the front. Then an operator at the thin side went down. Bryony turned and saw the angle had changed. Back to them. Her people moved immediately, but the cost had already arrived. The fallen operator tried to rise, got one knee under the body, and collapsed back against the concrete. "Can you move?" A shake of the head. Another burst hit the steel beside Milo. He threw himself sideways and landed shoulder first. The impact knocked the breath out of him. He came up slowly, one arm tight against his ribs, face blank with pain, and kept going. "Talk to me," Bryony said. Breathing. "That's not a report. It's the one I have. Can you carry?" "Not like before." That answer changed the team faster than any diagnosis could have. 2 healthy bodies now had to help the incapacitated operator. The earlier wounded person could no longer be moved at the same tempo. Milo could still judge surfaces and movement, but not lift or pivot with the same freedom. Bryony's right hand slipped on a small adjustment at exactly the wrong moment. She compensated with a broader motion, shifted the rifle against her body, and kept directing. They recovered cover. Behind them, one of the healthy operators tore a strip from a damaged sling and used it to secure the wounded person for movement. The work took hands that should have been watching outward. Bryony covered the gap herself until her fingers began to shake, then shifted the task before the shake became a miss. They did not recover the ground, the time, or the fighting body they had just lost. The new burden changed every next choice. A route that had been merely exposed became unusable because moving the wounded through it would take too long. A position Bryony might have held with one operator now needed 2. Could still tell her what the ground would tolerate, but he could not spend himself carrying someone across it. The denial work continued deeper in the yard, not with the same rhythm as before. That almost made it worse. The next metallic impact came after a longer gap, but by then Briani had spent that entire gap rebuilding a team that could still move. "Leave me here," the incapacitated operator said. "No. You lose too dragging me. We lose you if we don't. That's arithmetic. So is this." She assigned the burden and moved on before the exchange could become anything else. The renewed hostile pressure thinned again before Briani could make the quiet useful. It came hard, changed the local balance, then withdrew into absence. Her team remained in the fight, but smaller in every practical sense. One operator was finished for the mission. Another was still wounded. Milo's range and strength were reduced. Her own hand could manage broad work but not the fine control she had trusted at the start. The reallocation had been hers. She looked back toward the place from which the new fire had appeared. Nothing visible explained how the local picture had changed so much while sounding safer. Cass's force had not collapsed. The question was no longer whether the quiet meant control. It was what had happened while the guns were quiet. "We move when everyone can move," Briani said. Milo nodded, jaw tight. "And next time it goes quiet." Briani listened to the sector as the guns farther out stopped again. "Next time we don't pretend we know what that means." The guns farther out went quiet again. Briani did not hear control this time. She heard an unanswered question. That kept her from spending people too quickly. She held the team where broken steel and concrete gave them enough protection to think, while the yard kept trying to interrupt the process. A burst cracked somewhere deeper, then cut off. Metal rang. Dust drifted through damaged light. The transfer line took another distant impact that Brioni felt through the floor more than heard. Milo leaned against a support for half a breath, protecting his injured side. "Same kind of drop?" he asked. "Not the same place." Useful distinction. Maybe. Her right hand rested against the rifle, numb enough to slow small adjustments. She ignored the urge to test it again. Another sector lost fire. One moment there was pressure, the next space. Brioni watched the empty space instead of claiming control over it. She did not need to replay the whole yard. The pieces that mattered were already close at hand. On the apron, a competent position had gone quiet before her local success fully explained it. In Warehouse Row, fire returned from somewhere else. After the bay, a changed configuration appeared too quickly. Then the quiet outside the bay had looked useful until the thinned side was hit. "Every time the firing drops," she said, "something is different when it comes back." Milo looked past the battered edge of cover toward a stretch of industrial ground he had already checked twice. Not just different. He pointed with his good arm. A piece of stage equipment now sat at an angle that blocked part of the view beyond it. "That wasn't there like that," he said. "Impact could have shifted it." Could have. Brioni waited. Milo frowned at the floor near it. "But not those marks." The scrape across the grit was fresh enough to catch light differently. It did not tell her who had crossed, how many, or where they had gone. It told her something simpler. The physical state had changed during an interval when the firing had changed too. A sharp burst answered from deeper left, and one of the remaining operators ducked lower behind the steel lip. The quiet sector still gave them nothing. That mismatch pulled at Brioni harder than the scrape marks did. If the enemy were simply losing control, pressure should have been thinning in ways that matched the ground they had actually taken. Instead, one part of the fight was staying active enough to hold attention while another vanished cleanly. She could not see the movement itself. She could see what the movement left behind. A short burst sounded farther right. The quiet sector stayed quiet. Briani looked from one to the other. "Say it," Milo said. "I'm thinking." "You do that loudly." She ignored him. Cass's people were not collapsing. They were still shaping where her team looked. The old events stopped feeling separate. The silence was not always the result of pressure. Sometimes it was part of the movement. The quiet is movement, Bryony said. Milo glanced at the changed frame. Some of it. Good. You hate it when I agree with you. I hate it when you agree too completely. That earned the smallest breath of a laugh, cut short by pain in his ribs. The limitation mattered. This was not a new law of the yard. A gun could still go quiet because its operator was hit, because ammunition was low, because a position had become useless. But some of these low fire intervals were buying Cass's people room to change the local fight, while attention stayed somewhere else. Another faint metallic scrape came from ahead, faint beneath the echoes. Bryony looked at Milo. What can change before they finish? He studied the physical ground, not the enemy's intentions. Ahead of that frame, Babbage stretched still carries weight. If they're crossing there now, they'll have to commit before they get better cover. How long? Long enough to be wrong if we wait. That was Milo at his most useful. No prophecy, no perfect map, just a limit with an expiration date. The quiet interval was already closing. Pressure elsewhere remained active, keeping Bryony's people pinned just enough to make delay feel reasonable. Delay was exactly what she no longer trusted. Can we move the wounded through the same stretch? Not at assault speed. Then they stay protected here. Milo looked at her hand. And you? I'm going forward. That wasn't the question either. She met his eyes. He sighed. Fine, expiration dates. Bryony shifted the rifle against her shoulder and signaled the remaining assault-capable people. Her hand could still hold and direct broad work. Fine control had become something she spent only when the return justified it. Another quiet second passed. Then, another. Somewhere ahead, metal scraped against concrete again. They had spent 4 scenes reacting to positions after they changed. Now they had a chance to hit the change while it was still happening. We move now, Bryony said. Milo pushed away from the support and checked the usable ground one last time. The others shifted under the weight the team still carried. The next burst had not started yet. Bryony could feel everyone waiting for the old safe interpretation to return. It did not. The gap stayed dangerous because it was useful to someone. That was enough. Bryony moved before the next burst arrived. The interval was still open. Milo had given her a physical limit. One damaged stretch remained usable, and the industrial frame ahead narrowed what could change without exposure. That was enough. She signaled the team forward and gave away a job she would normally have kept. You hold the far pressure, she told one of the remaining operators. A short nod. If it moves, keep it from settling. The operator shifted into position. Precision cover was the part Bryony trusted most. Her right hand had changed that. Fine control arrived late and inconsistently. If she owned cover and movement at once, one would be late. Milo watched the damaged stretch. Still good? She asked. For a little while. You keep saying that. The yard keeps earning it. They moved. The first people crossed while the cover operator broke a hostile position's rhythm. Rounds snapped against steel and forced heads down. The opening held long enough for Bryony to keep the assault moving instead of stopping to solve the rifle problem herself. Her fingers dulled when she tightened them. Hold. Point. Move. Nothing delicate unless the moment justified it. Milo changed their movement before the first choice became a mistake. Not forward. Bryony stopped one step short of committing the next pair. What changed? He pointed toward the edge of the damaged stretch. Dust had begun to sift from beneath it, shaken loose by repeated impact. That part's starting to walk. Alternative? Wider line, more exposed. Still there in 30 seconds, Assant. Ask me in 20. Bryony redirected the movement. The cover operator forced one hostile position to stay low long enough for the next pair to cross the wider line. A burst from farther right answered and clipped the edge of their cover. One of Brianni's people stumbled, recovered, kept moving. Ahead, Cass's relocation was still in progress. She could finally see pieces of it. One hostile group had already reached a stronger position. Another was crossing between imperfect cover while friendly fire from elsewhere kept Brianni's team occupied. The timing was close, but not finished. "Second group," she said. "I see them," the cover operator answered. "Don't chase, hold the ones who can stop us." Brianni hated giving that sentence away. She also knew it was the right thing. The delegated fire shifted. One hostile position ducked as Milo sent the next bodies across. Brianni stayed with the movement. That choice changed the assault. The hostile group still in transit had to stop before reaching the place it had been moving toward. Two fighters flattened behind cover too shallow for the clean pressure they had been building. Another tried to continue and had to reverse when the friendly cover operator reopened the angle behind him. Cass's people answered immediately. Fire from the group that had completed its relocation cut across Brianni's path, forcing her team behind a battered steel support. "They finished that side," Milo said. "Can we still use this?" "For now." Brianni looked at the stopped group ahead. "Then we hit the unfinished part." The team pushed while the relocation was still broken in two. A hostile fighter tried to cross and was forced back by Brianni's cover operator. The interruption kept the lane open for two of her people. Milo followed, protecting his injured side. "You're slower," Brianni said. Observant. "You're also bleeding time." "So are you." He nodded at her hand. "Fair." Another burst hammered the steel above them. Brianni used one precise moment, no more, to break immediate pressure and then moved again. She did not stay behind the rifle searching for a cleaner answer. The relocation fractured. The cover operator's bursts hit the steel lip in front of the unfinished hostile position and forced two heads down. That gave Milo enough time to push one more person across before the angle reopened, a gain Brianni could hear and use. One part of Cass's force was fighting from where it had intended to go. Another was stuck short of that position. Their supporting fire began to overlap badly, forcing one side to stop shooting whenever the other tried to move. Brianni heard the difference first. The earlier pattern had created distinct windows. Now the sounds crowded each other. "Keep them split," she said. The cover operator answered, "Working." Milo pointed toward a section of usable floor beside the industrial frame. "That holds. The next bit won't if everyone piles on it." "Send two." "Already did." Brianni looked at him. "What?" Milo said. "You told me movement was mine." She almost argued. Then the first pair reached better cover because he had not waited. "Keep it." The assault pressed into the disruption. Farther in the yard, the steady sequence of impacts against the transfer line work changed. A long gap opened between them. Brianni registered the absence but did not celebrate it. Slowed was not stopped. The gain had cost them. They abandoned equipment rather than lose the window. The wounded remained protected behind them. Milo's breathing had gone shallow. Brianni's hand trembled after a hard adjustment, then went numb again. Still, the local fight had changed. Cass's clean relocation had failed because Brianni's team reached it before the transition finished. The success lasted long enough to teach them. The next firing pattern never gave them another clean interval. A burst stopped on one side, but another started before the silence could become useful. Movement overlapped with fire. One hostile position abandoned a better angle rather than pause long enough to expose another transition. Milo listened. There goes the quiet. Brianni watched a fighter cross under rougher, less efficient cover than Cass's people had used before. They're paying for it. So are we. Another burst cracked before the echo died. The yard sounded less organized and was harder to read. Brioni looked toward the next stretch of Ravelyn yard and understood what the success had cost them. They had learned to hit one kind of silence. Cass had already begun removing it. The clean silence never came back. Fire thinned, thickened, crossed itself, then changed direction before Brioni could settle a pattern. Cass's people paid for the uglier rhythm. Their positions were less efficient, their movement rougher, but the readable pauses were gone. A burst that should have ended stayed alive too long. Another began before the first had cleared. Someone moved inside the noise instead of behind it. Brioni watched one hostile position give up a better angle just to keep another movement covered. Messius, Milo said. Harder to read. Same thing, if you're the one getting shot at. Brioni tried to hold the whole picture anyway. One threat cut across the team's forward movement. Another worried the wounded path behind them. A damaged industrial section Milo had been using, as a reference point, began shedding dust every time nearby steel took a hit. Then she saw Cass. Not as a distant idea behind the gunfire. A man moving fast between two positions while his people covered the exposed gap badly but continuously. He stopped long enough to gesture one group wider, then moved again before the instruction could become a static target. His presence cost them. Brioni could hear it. Fire overlapped where the earlier system would have separated it. One position lost a clean lane while he pulled another into alignment. He's carrying the seams himself, Milo said. Brioni watched Cass disappear behind steel. For now. Cass did not linger long enough to become an easy target. Brioni reached for the highest visible threat and the broader command problem at the same time. Her right hand closed late. She corrected the grip and felt the fingers tremble. The hostile position ahead needed precision. The wounded element behind them needed movement. Milo needed a decision on the failing section before the decision expired. Brioni tried to keep all three. Hold rear movement, she said, then started to adjust her own rifle. The fine correction slipped. 1 second. Milo looked at the damaged section, then at the people still using it. Leave the frame, he said. Brioni turned. We need that cover. We need the people more. I didn't release it. You did when it started moving. He was already acting. Milo pulled the nearest operator off the position and redirected the wounded element without waiting for permission. The team abandoned the damaged cover and one piece of equipment that could not be moved quickly enough. Seconds later, the outer edge sagged under another impact and dropped several inches. The collapse blocked the position they had left. They lost ground and equipment. They kept the wounded from being trapped on the wrong side. Cass's force pressed the gap immediately. Not wildly. One hostile pair advanced only far enough to punish the abandoned space, then stopped before the move exposed them to the cover. Brioni had delegated earlier. Cass appeared again beyond them, crossing toward a second cluster that had begun firing out of rhythm. Brioni saw him point, saw one fighter shift, heard a short command carry through the steel. Left, keep it alive. The response was immediate. Two bursts that had been competing separated just enough to restore useful pressure. Cass made the broken system coherent enough to keep hurting them. Brioni raised the rifle to take the highest visible threat. Her hand flattened into numbness before she finished the adjustment. She lowered the muzzle a fraction and stopped lying to herself. One precise moment was still possible. Sustained ownership was not. You, she said to the operator already carrying far pressure. Keep the long problem. Got it. Milo. I'm busy saving your terrible position. Movement is yours, don't wait on me. He glanced at her once. That sentence took you long enough. Make me regret it later. I plan to. The exchange disappeared under another burst. Brioni stayed inside the broader fight. She chose when the team moved, what objective could be spent, which loss they could still absorb. The precision task remained with someone else. Cass's new method kept grinding at them. His people accepted awkward positions to keep motion continuous. A fighter crossed while another was still firing from too close an angle. A second group gave up a protected pause and moved under noise instead. They wasted efficiency to deny Briony a clean window. Cass moved between them again. Each appearance told Briony the same thing without giving her his thoughts. The degraded coordination needed him physically close enough to repair it. That was a cost he had chosen. It was also a vulnerability she could not exploit without abandoning something else. The inner yard opened ahead, broad enough to create more problems rather than fewer. 3 demands arrived almost together. The wounded had to be moved before the position behind them became untenable. A hostile pair was expanding fire across the forward side, and Milo pointed to a damaged surface ahead that had begun to shift under vibration. "Left side won't keep taking this," he said. The operator on far pressure called, "They're moving again." Briony looked once toward the last place she had seen Cass, then stopped trying to make every answer come through her. "You move the wounded," she told one survivor. A nod. "You keep their forward fire from settling." "Copy." Milo was already studying the failing surface. Briony kept the whole fight and released the pieces. The operator Briony had left on the long problem shifted 2 steps, without being told, and cut off a hostile angle before it settled. That tiny act did more to change the next 5 seconds than any speech about trust could have. Briony registered it, adjusted the broader plan around it, and kept moving. No one waited for a second permission. The yard had become too fast for one person to own every decisive choice, and her hand had removed the last excuse for pretending otherwise. Ahead, the inner yard offered several live problems at once. All of them were expensive. None of them were willing to wait. The inner yard gave Briony 3 problems at once, and she did not pull them back into her own hands. The wounded had to move before the position behind them became untenable. Cass's fire widened across the open center, pinning anyone who tried to cross. The damaged surface Milo had watched was failing under repeated vibration, chips breaking free whenever nearby steel took another hit. 3 problems, 3 consequences. "You move the wounded," Briony told one operator. "On it." To the one carrying far pressure, "Keep their front from settling." "Got it." Milo was already crouched near the broken edge, studying what still held. Briony looked at him. "Bunt, don't." "I didn't say anything." "You were about to ask how long." "How long?" Milo gave her a tired look. Rude. The exchange ended under gunfire. Briony kept responsibility for the whole fight without reclaiming every task. Her right hand was nearly useless for sustained fine work now. She could still make one precise decision when the moment truly justified it, but living behind the rifle would leave the rest of the yard ownerless. The wounded elements started moving. Farther ahead, the delegated operator kept Cass's people from settling into a stronger firing position. Milo shifted 2 people away from the crumbling surface before it made the decision for them. The 3 actions happened without waiting for Briony. The distributed work gained ugly, measurable progress. The operator moved the wounded in short stages, using whatever cover remained usable. Milo changed the line twice as damage altered the yard. "Right side's holding," he called. "For everyone. For people who don't all stand on it at once. Good enough. That phrase is going to get us killed. Not today." Briony used one brief precision opportunity to break a hostile angle long enough for movement, then handed the problem back to the operator already carrying it. Her fingers shook afterward and would not settle. Cass's people kept adapting. Their fire was less elegant, but no longer gave Briony a clean rhythm to exploit. She caught sight of Cass once between 2 steel structures, moving toward the forward side where his people had begun losing coherence. He did not stay. A short gesture, a shouted correction, then he shifted again. The forward hostile fire tightened. "They're waiting this side," Milo said. "I see it." "What's he giving up?" Brioni listened. The answer was not obvious. Behind Cass's forward pressure, the denial work had become less regular. A metallic impact came, then a longer gap. His force could not keep every part of the yard equally strong. That did not make the weak parts safe. Brioni had paid enough to understand that distinction. A friendly move opened a temporary chance to shift the wounded, while the forward hostile position was busy responding to pressure. The operator responsible for movement took it. Cass answered fast. Fire that had been holding the forward side swung onto the supporting element. At the exact moment the wounded were crossing exposed ground. The first rounds hit steel. The next burst caught the operator carrying part of the movement burden. The person went down and did not get back into the task. "Pull them in," Brioni said. 2 survivors moved without waiting. The wounded were recovered, but the team lost the role that had been carrying them efficiently. From then on, every casualty movement consumed more healthy bodies. Cass had funded the exchange. Brioni felt the consequence immediately. The forward operator could no longer stay fully committed to suppressing hostile movement, because one person had to peel back and help. Milo's movement choices narrowed because fewer bodies were available to execute them. Every transfer took longer. "Still want distributed authority?" Milo asked, breath short. "I want more people." "Stores closed." "Then, keep moving." He did. The failure made the earlier decision costly. Cass's counter had also cost him something. To shift enough fire onto the wounded crossing, he had concentrated people and attention along the forward side. That left the denial effort protected by fewer distributed positions than before. Brioni carefully watched what Cass's force did next unfold. One hostile pair pulled farther back from the open center rather than keep trading ground. They could preserve themselves if more followed. Another group stayed dispersed along the yard, continuing to make every friendly movement expensive. Near terminal block, however, pressure began to thicken. Not because the yard forced it. Because the denial work still needed bodies close enough to finish it. Milo heard the same change. He could still leave. He could. And fail the job. Brioni nodded once. A burst from farther out proved another option remained too. Cass could stay spread across the yard and keep making Brioni pay for every step. But the longer his people stayed scattered, the less force remained close to the transfer line, and the denial work had already slowed. Cass did not have one path. He had several bad choices. The yard showed Brioni which one he was taking. One hostile position abandoned a wider angle and fell back toward terminal block. Then another. Cass appeared near the center of that movement, physically redirecting one group while another covered the shift. He was giving up some reach across the inner yard to build enough force around the objective. Milo watched the relocation. He's pulling them in. Not all of them. Enough. That was the point. The transfer line had become more vulnerable to interruption at the same time. Terminal block became harder to approach. Cass was choosing mission completion over preserving a wider, safer distribution. Brioni adjusted without turning the choice into a trap. Wounded stay protected here. The operator beside them nodded. Milo, you own what can still carry the rest of us. I already did. I know. The far pressure operator checked the angle toward terminal block. What do I own? The distance I can't. That answer sat differently now. No one commented on it. They moved under the limits they still had. Ahead, Cass's force concentrated around terminal block, accepting greater exposure elsewhere to keep the denial work alive. The inner yard remained broad behind them. Withdrawal was still possible. Dispersion was still possible. Cass had chosen neither. The next fight would happen where he had decided the mission was worth spending what remained. Pressure thickened around terminal block until every second felt borrowed. Brioni could still hear the denial work under the gunfire, irregular now but not stopped. Each metallic impact said the last usable transfer line had not been saved. Cass had chosen to spend his remaining coherence here. Brioni kept the cover task with the operator already carrying it. "You keep the long watch." The operator nodded. "You sure?" Brioni flexed her right hand once. The fingers answered, with the same delayed weakness they had been giving her since the inner yard. Yes. She could still judge a shot and choose a moment. Sustained fine control was gone. "Milo," she said. He was already studying the damaged approach around terminal block, one arm tight against his ribs. "You own what still moves. Finally speaking my language." The team split around the jobs they already owned. The window was closing. Cover. Held. Milo redirected one element around damaged ground that had begun to crumble along the edge. "Not both groups," he said. "It won't take them." Brioni changed the movement order without asking for more certainty. The cover operator broke one hostile angle and kept it broken long enough for the assault element to move. Brioni stayed with the people who had to reach the denial work before Cass finished the job. The first move forced Cass to answer. Brioni saw him near the forward side of terminal block, moving between two positions while his people tried to stop the assault and keep the denial work alive. He looked toward the friendly movement, then changed his deployment with a short command. "Close the near side, keep the work moving." His people reacted immediately. Fire shifted away from the wider yard and folded tighter against the assault element. Brioni understood the correction as it happened. They had treated Cass's concentration as if it would make his reaction slower. It made the distances between his decisions shorter. The cover operator held one line down, but another opened closer than expected. "Rear task stays rear," Brioni said. She did not take the precision problem back. Milo pointed toward the broken industrial flooring ahead. "That edge won't carry both groups." "Can it carry us?" "One group. Once maybe." "Good enough." He grimaced. "I still hate that phrase. You can complain after." "If there's an after." The wounded stayed back. The assault element went forward. Cass's people met them hard enough to stop clean movement. The denial work sounded again. Closer rhythm now. Time had narrowed again. Brioni took one precise moment, used it to break immediate pressure, and moved before her hand could fail on a second demand. The fight outgrew rifles almost immediately. Brioni hit hard cover, changed direction, and saw Cass reorganizing again instead of retreating. One fighter blocked her while Cass shifted toward the denial work, trying to keep the last action alive. The cover operator broke that angle from farther out. "Move," the operator called. Brioni moved forward. Milo's voice cut across the noise. "Not left, floors going." She changed direction before the damaged edge failed under combined weight. He came off the steel support fast, weapon trapped too close to use cleanly. The contact was immediate. Cass drove into her weakened side, forcing her right hand against the weapon until the fingers opened. He felt the failure and pressed it. Brioni stopped demanding fine control from a hand that did not have it. She shifted her balance, kept the collision away from the denial work, and stayed connected while Cass tried to break away. For a second he almost succeeded. Then the delegated cover operator cut off the hostile fighter trying to reach them. Milo shouted, "2 steps right." Brioni obeyed without looking. The flooring to her left dropped with a hard metallic snap. Cass had to change footing. Brioni drove him away from the denial controls and into the space her surviving team could reach. Cass recovered quickly and tried to break back toward the work area. One operator met him from the side. Brioni stayed on him at close range, using weight obstruction, and timing rather than the hand that had already failed. Milo's physical warning kept the supporting operator off the collapsing edge long enough to join the contact. His weapon was stripped clear. He went down under combined force. When he tried to rise, Brioni and another operator already had him controlled against the concrete. Around them, the remaining organized hostile pressure broke apart. The cover operator kept the last dangerous angle occupied until it stopped answering. The denial work ceased. For several seconds, nobody trusted the quiet. Then it held. Brioni waited long enough to know the difference. Cass was down, disarmed, and no longer able to command the fight. Milo checked what remained physically usable around the transfer line. He moved slowly now, guarding his ribs, testing only what had to be tested. "Still serviceable," he said. Brioni looked at the line. Damaged, limited, working. One operator was down from the final push. Others were carrying injuries that would outlast the yard. Milo could barely straighten. Brioni flexed her dominant hand and got the same poor response. The adrenaline had changed nothing. The operator, who had carried the long precision task, started to move toward the others. Brioni stopped them. "Stay high." The operator looked at her. "You keep sustained overwatch," Brioni said. "I'm not taking it back." A beat. "Understood." Brioni turned to the rest. "Wounded first. Keep the transfer line clear. Tell me what still moves." Milo gave her a tired look. "You really like that phrase. It keeps working. Unlike some of us. Move." He did. Brioni stayed in broader coordination while the surviving team began the slow physical work of securing people, checking usable space, and holding what they had saved. The yard around Terminal Block was damaged and far from restored. Her hand still answered badly. The line still worked. Cass could no longer stop them. The fight was over.